and with Jamie and has got a lot of that information set up. So without any objection, I would like to have Representative Bear chair this meeting. I've talked to him about that, and
And
he would
and
be able to do that. So is that possible?
Chip, before we go live,
Mhm.
Jamie's has a family emergency and he won't be able to be here today. So we're going to put, if Representative Bear wants to speak generally about the email management solutions they're coming up with, great, but we won't be able to do the demonstration today.
Okay. All right.
So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And beyond that, I think we're ready to go.
All right. Very good. Well, I'm sorry to hear Jamie's having that problem, and we'll be praying for his family. So, all right, Representative Bear, if you would please. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Okay. Ms. Phillips, are we ready to go live?
Yes, we are.
Okay, let's go live. Let me know when we are online.
You are online, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. And we'll call this meeting to order. And this is the Select Committee on Legislative Emails. And we'll start with roll call. Ms. Phillips, please.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, for the Subcommittee on Legislator Email Policy on July 15th, 2025, Senator Guru.
Here.
Representative Bear.
Here.
Co-Chairman Crago.
Here.
And Co-Chairman Nyman.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And I am acting as chair, and so we'll go ahead and move forward with this. Mr. Obrecht, if you'd like to take over and move us into the agenda, I'd appreciate that. And when we do get to the portion that was going to be presented by Mr. Schaub, I will go ahead and do what I can to share with the group and the public where we're at on that issue. So when we get there, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As we discussed at the Management Council meeting in April, had an issue come up shortly before the session about emails being delivered to legislator spam or junk folders rather than their inboxes. And that issue was worked on during the session, but really wasn't resolved fully. Because under Management Council policy, legislators are responsible for their own emails and not the Legislative Service Office, it seemed appropriate to me that Management Council look at this issue and decide what council wanted to do, if anything, on it. So that's what brings us here today, Mr. Chairman. And to kick the meeting off, we had a meeting yesterday, LSO staff, with Microsoft, who provides our email service through Outlook. And Mr. Brandon Brin with Microsoft graciously offered to come give this subcommittee a general overview of what goes into Outlook's spam filters, junk filters, how emails are ranked, what may cause them to not be delivered to an inbox, but to one of those other folders. And Mr. Brin has legislative experience with the Massachusetts legislature, working for them before he came to Microsoft. So he is uniquely well positioned to give us some general overview of the Outlook operating system. Now, I will say that Mr. Brin is not familiar with the Wyoming legislature's Outlook exchange at the moment. Microsoft has offered to look at our settings to see if any tweaks could be made given the nature of this organization. And we're going to take him up on that offer if the subcommittee wants to, and probably present any changes that may be suggested at a later meeting. So, Mr. Chairman, if you're okay, I guess Mr. Brin can.
Thank you, Mr. Obrecht. Without objection, and raise your hand if you object, we'll go ahead and have Mr. Brin present what Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Corporation can help us with. And Mr. Brin, just to help you with your presentation, what we had in our last meeting, as far as a bit of debate, is what really qualifies as spam. And so, we have entities out there, political entities that represent grassroots voters and the public of interest, that send us a lot of emails that look extremely similar to each other. They might have a name that is different coming from the actual person that contacted that group or that organization, or that organization is representing. So the emails would be extremely similar, but coming from different individuals as far as the signature, but not necessarily the address. So, at question is whether those should be blocked or not. Currently, our settings, I believe, are reduced to the point where we're receiving a lot of those emails. But it was an issue brought up by the public where we were not receiving those. And we were, in fact, receiving them, but they were going to our quarantine folder. So if you could just share with us what you can from Microsoft's angle, we'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, my name is Brandon Brent. I'm a senior technology strategist here at Microsoft, working on our state, local government, and education team. I'm a certified information systems security professional, as well as certified Microsoft security architect. Prior to coming over to Microsoft, I served as the IT director, as well as chief information security officer for the Massachusetts House and for the Senate for the better part of 7 years, where I had the opportunity to migrate the House and Senate email systems from our data center into Microsoft Exchange, which is our cloud email service that we use here in the Commonwealth, as well as you do as well there in Wyoming. So what I hope to do today really is just provide sort of a basic sense of how are we examining email? What are the criteria that we use to determine whether or not an email is considered to be junk or spam or not? And then I'll provide somewhat of a recommendation, high level, in terms of sort of why the approach is the way it is, as well as some recommendations for the organization in terms of how we might be able to mitigate or remediate those challenges. But we experience similar challenges as well. So to a certain extent, there's a level of fine tuning that needs to be done to these systems, right, to ensure that we're blocking the messages that need to be blocked, and likewise allowing in messages that need to be for the better of our constituents. So with that, I'll get started. So from an email service perspective, right, the legislature uses a system that's called Exchange Online. Microsoft has what's called an Exchange Online protection, and that is specifically the service that is responsible for filtering and scanning all incoming, outgoing, as well as internal email. The intention here, and the reason why we have these tools in the first place, is because email is, generally speaking, the most common way that cyber threats enter state government systems, right? Even in my time, apologies, the lighting in here. In my capacity, when serving in state government, I can tell you that sort of the most significant cyber threats that we experienced came through email on a regular basis. So I think for us, the focus here and sort of the attention that we put on this issue is actually very critical. So in terms of how we are looking at or examining incoming email is as follows. So sort of the first is sort of what we'll call sort of stopping known threats at the gate, right? And that's very simply by looking at emails and the source from which they came, right? The internet, much like phone numbers, uses something called IP addresses, which are just unique addresses for different devices, servers, computers that are on the internet. It's basically a way of knowing where something's coming from. So just like when I get a call from an unknown number on my cell phone, and I might say, I don't know that person. Very similarly, we may be looking at the IP addresses for senders of email and making decisions that are based on what we call real-time block lists. Basically, if you are as a sender have been flagged by other organizations. Most of the large email providers contribute to a much broader list of blocked senders, right? Then if you're on that list, then out of the gate, we will block that email, right? And then sort of the next step is very similar to the sort of trust but verify. So the idea is once we say, okay, well, it's coming in from a source that we do not know to necessarily be malicious or having previously sent junk email, the next step for us is to verify the sender's identity, right? Email as a technology is very insecure. It was not necessarily architected or built with security in mind. So the ability for me to send an email and pretend to be someone else is actually very easy. So there are additional sort of tools that we can use, and individual senders can set these tools up that basically help recipients of their email to validate that the sender is actually who they say they are. Those are known in the industry as SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And basically, they're designed to prevent spoofing and impersonation. So if the entity that's sending the emails has not set those things up, those contribute to the overall score that we provide to the email message individually as to whether or not we classify that as junk or not junk. The next step is actually examining the content of the message itself. Specifically, what we're looking at is going to be attachments and links, URLs that are included in the email, and whether or not those links and URLs are either associated with previous messages that have been identified as spam or junk, or if those attachments or links are malicious in and of themselves, i.e., do those links or do those attachments contain viruses or malicious code that could be used to compromise the environment. We're also looking at subject lines to a certain degree, primarily looking at patterns, so historical patterns of junk email. So the sort of common Nigerian prince scam from the late 2000s is a pretty good example of that, where the same subject line was used over and over. It's not the only criteria that we look at, but is a contributing factor in terms of the way that we score messages. And in terms of their likelihood of being junk or not. In addition, we do provide a little bit. So we do look at URLs in terms of the destination, or rather where the URL takes you, because a URL is simply a pointer. It simply takes you to a particular site or a particular area of the internet. And if that location is known or associated with either malicious activity, or if it's associated with a sender of junk email, then that can also contribute to the score as well. Last but not least, there's policy. We provide flexibility in the platform for IT teams as well to customize the way that these filters work. Right. The idea is perhaps there may be an organization that is known to send, sort of, whether that may be harassing content, whether it may just be unsolicited content to the body or to the members. The IT team may take action to block those individuals or block even the organization as a whole that's sending those messages. I can tell you firsthand, having responded to a number of cyber incidents that occurred over email, that this was a feature that we used quite a bit when we would identify that malicious mail was typically coming from the same domain or the same entity, or the sort of .com, as it were. The reason why these tools are important primarily, or especially from a government perspective, are because they help us to protect sensitive citizen and constituent data. They reduce the risk of ransomware and phishing attacks, and ultimately improve productivity. I can also tell you, just based on my experience, that members and some of the members who are on the committee members that are on the call today can likely attest to receiving a very large volume of email. So the burden of asking them to then differentiate between what is spam, what is junk mail, and what is legitimate constituent outreach or stakeholder outreach um, incredibly burdensome. So from a productivity perspective, this is really a priority for us to be able to get it right. And then sort of just in closing, Microsoft, we have teams can work with us LSO. I've already proposed to do so for us to help sort of fine tune the way that the system is currently implemented today. We sort of have default settings, right? There's a customizability in terms of how these tools are deployed, right? So you can, if you can think of it as a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most restrictive, 0 being the least restrictive, sort of how we sort of set that control accordingly to ensure that, right, that we're appropriately filtering email that should be filtered, and likewise releasing email and having that delivered as it should be delivered. So with that, I'll pause if there are any questions or any comments.
Yeah, Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Brandon, for being with us today. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and please kind of bear with me as you may look from my appearance. I'm kind of a prototypical legislator, a little bit older, a little bit less technologically savvy when it comes to stuff. So if I ask questions that may sound rudimentary or adolescent to you, just consider the source. What I heard you say just now, and make sure that I got this right, is that when Microsoft through Outlook has filters for emails, what you're looking for is security. Your goal is security. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So if I follow up, Mr. Chairman, I got a couple of these questions. So I just want to try to get a handle on that. So if the head of an organization, and I want to send mass emails to legislators, either around the country or in this case, in the state of Wyoming, if I hire a company to do my email for me, and I hire a company that's on this, that may be for security purposes on a list that has been known to do dubious or send out dubious things or attachments or whatever, URLs, whatever it is that can bring down the system from a security standpoint, that could be a reason why emails get stopped. It doesn't, what I'm hunting for here is it's not about political persuasion. It's about who I hired to do something. Would that be correct?
Yes, sir. I'll even refine that even more. It can be even less innocuous than the individual company or the firm that you've chosen to send those communications. Because we'll see a number of those groups, in fact, even members themselves, right, sort of outside of the legislative capacity, will use mass mailings, right, to be able to engage with and communicate with their constituency. The tools that are off the shelf today, or the most popular tools, still require you to configure certain security capabilities to ensure that recipients are able to validate that the message is not, in fact, junk or spam. So if those entities haven't done so, they may be using a very reputable service, a very reputable tool, but if they haven't taken the step to configure the necessary sort of capabilities there, then they're at risk for being flagged as junk, not just by Microsoft, but frankly by most of the major email providers.
Okay, if I can follow up again, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
And it may not be me hiring, it may be I may hire someone, a firm, to do my political work for me, and they may subcontract that out. So it may be 2 or 3 steps down the road, and totally not anything malicious or malicious on my part by doing it, or the organization's part. It's just how that gets set up to do. And so that it may or may not be, and probably isn't malicious. It's just people in the marketplace hire people, and so it could be anything from that. Would that be a fair statement? And then I got one more.
That is
okay. And so that having all been said, then if those are known and they get flagged from a security standpoint, publishing or putting out to the public how that occurred would be in and of itself not exactly something from a security standpoint, a smart thing to do. Is that a fair statement?
Senator, just to clarify, you're suggesting the question is more along the lines of, is there risk in the legislature publishing a full list of email addresses and email domains that have been blocked?
Yes, that's kind of where I'm going. And this is from Microsoft's, from your point of view, from your company and what you do.
From our perspective, there would be risk there, and the primary risk would be you would be making public basically the list of email addresses for which you're currently blocking, which implies that if an email address isn't on that list, then it is highly likely that message is highly likely to be delivered. So as an attacker, that would be a fantastic tool that we could use, right, to ensure that our messages are going, or that increase the likelihood that those messages are going to get past the filtering mechanisms.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Representative Nyman?
Thank you, Chairman. Just one quick question on your levels. You talked about the kind of a 1 to 10 on control and basically security. Is the level 1 still, from Microsoft's perspective, is it secure? And I mean, how do you determine that? How is that level? I mean, the least of that level, how much protection is there versus the number 10 level? And like if Microsoft would determine that we wanted to back off and allow more opportunity for these different organizations to do it, at the very least, is the level 1, curiously, a level of protection that will keep us from being in trouble with anything and receiving any of the other issues that you were talking about there?
Mr. Brin?
That's a good question. So in my experience, I haven't seen any of our customers or anyone that I've worked, any organization that I've worked with actually set their spam filtering threshold to level 1 or even level 0. Speaking from a Microsoft perspective, we provide you and we provide generically customers with the ability to customize the way that the environments that they use operate, right? And I think spam filtering, email filtering in general isn't necessarily an exact science. So I made reference to scoring, right? It is somewhat subjective based upon the criteria that we have identified. And frankly, the criteria may change a year from now. We may discover new, more accurate methods for classifying or identifying spam based upon advancements in AI and sort of other technologies. Whether or not you would be secure at a lower level, I would say generally no, because it would be more permissive from an email perspective. And frankly, it's interesting. My old boss at the legislature used to ask me all the time, like, are we secure? Are we secure today? And I think my response to him would be like, as far as I know, right? The challenge is that these filters are not 100%, right? They do allow in some level of phishing or junk email, as you know. Although today we're sort of talking about this in sort of the other way around. But what I'll say is that that is sort of reason why we focus on user training as well, as sort of that sort of second layer to ensure that the users understand that those messages are still going to get through. So to answer the crux of your question, no, it would certainly be less secure. Sure, whether or not that's adequate for the organization, right? It's sort of a decision that folks would need to make. But ultimately, I haven't seen a customer at least in my time here at Microsoft, working in our state and local government organization, choose to lower that threshold to a 1. But there is a certain degree of sort of tuning, as it were, that generally speaking needs to be done. And it was very, very similar to our experience where we would increase the spam filtering threshold. And then now, we're sort of blocking messages that that should have otherwise been delivered. And likewise, if we reduce the threshold too low, well, then the volume of junk email gets to be too high, and that has an impact on productivity as well as security. So there's a certain level of sort of fine tuning that needs to be done, just sort of based upon the type of email that and the volume and the frequency which those email messages are being sent to the organization.
Follow up, Speaker Nyman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and that's my question. So we can kind of, what you're saying, I guess, if I'm following you here, we can adjust this kind of on the fly. If we see things that are happening, we can address those things and kind of make allowances or restrictions as necessary as we get notifications, is what you're saying.
Yes, sir. And another feature that we offer, and you should have this in your Outlook today, as do the members. And anyone else who has an email box within the organization, which is the ability to flag or otherwise report messages as spam, as junk, or as a phishing message. And what that does is it helps to improve the overall service, not just for the legislature itself, but also globally as well across our entire ecosystem that we operate, both from a enterprise perspective for folks such as yourselves, as well as consumer, right? We offer free email service too, right? And by reporting those individual messages, you are submitting those to Microsoft for us to examine and giving us a data point by which we are able to improve the overall security posture of our email service, right? So recognize that individual members have the ability to, or frankly, anyone with an email address within the organization has the ability to report individual messages. And that will have an impact in terms of helping the system to learn, to ultimately improve its performance.
Follow up, Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Chairman. So if I'm following you correctly, individual legislators could flag those emails and have an effect on their ability to be able to even be coming in. I mean, if you're being flagged and multiple legislators are flagging them saying that this is phishing, this is some kind of a junk email and stuff like that, that will have a direct impact on those groups' ability to be able to send emails that would be able to be received. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brent, I'm going to do a bit of a follow-up on that, just a detail, because the way you described it, an individual can basically mark a sender as phishing or spam, and that would actually, based on your description, affect other mail recipients as well throughout the legislature, even globally throughout Microsoft. Is that an accurate statement?
Potentially, yes. So when you do that, when a user receives an email and flags that email as spam, for that individual user, it's going to take that email and it's going to move that to their junk folder. It also may have an impact on that sender's ability to send additional emails for that mailbox to receive email from that sender in the future. It also, by doing so, it also reports that message to Microsoft, in which we will examine that message, and we will make a determination as to whether or not there's certain factors, certain elements in that message aligned to what the criteria that we use to evaluate whether or not that message is spam or not, and ultimately helps us to improve the service. So it's not necessarily a one-for-one. For example, if you receive an email today and you flag that it's spam, it's not necessarily a guarantee that if that were sent to another member, right, that email would be blocked outright. It may contribute to the overall scoring of that message in the future, or rather subsequent messages sent from that sender. But it's not necessarily a guarantee, right, that if you flag a message as junk, that for the entire body or for the entire organization, any subsequent messages that are sent are also going to be flagged as junk. It's just a contributing factor.
Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So while it may, just following up on this line, so if I report something as junk, it gets sent to you, it gets sent to everybody, and the email in question will get sent to my junk folder. But it's just one criteria that you all back at the main office look at and over many criteria. And so necessarily one person doing that wouldn't tip it. Even if a lot of legislators did it over hundreds and hundreds of emails. I just looked. I got 163 emails in the last 24 hours on one subject. And I didn't mark any of them as junk, but if I did, and I got a feeling that some of my legislative colleagues probably have, if they're getting the same ones I'm getting, that that wouldn't necessarily tip the whole scale, would it? Or I'm trying to get a scale here that if me and three other legislators hit something as junk, that wouldn't necessarily kick everyone's into junk, but if everyone did, it might. But even if those things were true, it would still be in the junk folder. It would still be in the system.
That's correct. It's also worth noting that for each individual mailbox, for every account, there are account level junk email settings as well. So you, Senator, can actually, in your Outlook mailbox, you can configure strict or standard incoming junk email filtering as well. So each individual member has the ability to fine tune to a certain degree or increase the level of security on their individual mailbox. When you flag a message as phishing, I do want to differentiate. That message is not moved into junk because the idea is that is a malicious message, and we wouldn't want to even provide the ability for someone to inadvertently open that message. Perhaps I reported it as phishing today, and then 2 weeks from now I forgot about it, and I'm sort of examining my junk email folder, and I inadvertently click on something that might compromise my account or the systems at large. So we actually provide you with and then it's also worth noting that and this happens to me from time to time as well, and I work at Microsoft, I will inadvertently flag a message as spam, right? And perhaps I forget. So the notion that I only need to flag something as spam or phishing, or rather spam or junk once for it to have a significant impact on whether or not future messages are delivered. It's not true. It's just a contributing factor.
Okay, if I can follow up one more, because we hear this about that people tell us that their emails are getting quarantined and it's being done with some nefarious intent or intent not to have us see them. I can only speak for myself. I mark things as junk. I never mark things as phishing. I get things from our staff saying, "Don't open this," and I always pray when I get that email. I look back and say, "Did I open it?" But I get those. I get those emails, and I try, but I don't mark things as phishing. I mark things as junk. And yeah, you're right. I may get another email in my inbox the next day, but generally, if I do it enough, ones from that address or that organization or whatever, they just go to my junk folder. And then I look at my junk folder, or then each day I get my quarantine list and I see the quarantine list. But all the emails are there. And I know that because actually I went through this exercise with a reporter yesterday. I type in the name of a group that has sent me email that I marked as junk months ago. And all those emails come up. All of them come up on my computer. Every single one comes right up. And sometimes, to be truthful, I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. The reporter was smart enough to figure that out, say, type in this and do that. And so, once again, knowing who you're talking to here. So the notion that I'm not getting emails really isn't factual in this case. I may not be getting them in my straight inbox, but they're in one of three places: the email, the junk, or the quarantine file, which I get every day. And one's available automatically. And if I just type in quarantine, I get the quarantine file as well. Is that kind of the way it works?
It's true. I think I do want to go back to sort of that first step in terms of how we handle email and sort of the notion of the front door. There are some messages, right, that we classify right out of the gate as being phishing or otherwise malicious or unsolicited, coming from a sender who's, you know, sort of been known to send junk email in the past. And that those messages never actually are allowed to enter the email system, much less be delivered to the individual user's mailbox.
Okay, and one more follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So if I was counseling a group or if I was setting up some sort of organization, and wanted to send a lot of emails to legislators about stuff, I mean, I thought I kind of got the indication from you, but maybe I'm missing it because you said you do go through and check, or the system checks. I mean, you don't do it personally, but recommended organizations don't send URLs and send too many links to things, because the more links you send would probably degrade you on some list and may kick you into the spam folder. Or is that not necessarily true?
Not not necessarily, sir. I think it's more so the quality than the quantity.
Okay.
Right. So if the locations to which they are referring to are associated with other emails that have been flagged as or otherwise determined to be junk, then yes. Right. So if there's a campaign with a link to an article, for example, right, 1,000 emails come into the organization and those are all blocked to begin with, then the fact that URL or that link could be a contributing factor in terms of scoring for any future messages. No one particular element is the end all be all. There are some that are, right? So if you're what we call spoofing or otherwise pretending to be someone else, then we have mechanisms to catch that right at the front door, and those are things that we block. And those are things that, as an end user, you would not see those, like you wouldn't see any sort of reference to that in your junk email. So it's worth noting that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions from the committee? Mr. Brin, I have a couple, and based off that last line of questioning, can our IT department differentiate those emails blocked by Microsoft or IT's settings of Microsoft Exchange? And can they differentiate those from those that are being blocked by an individual legislator with settings that they've put on their individual email program?
So from a technical perspective, all incoming email into the email system is logged. So whether or not that email is deemed to be appropriate and is delivered to the user's mailbox, or if that message is blocked, right, regardless of what the disposition ultimately of that message is, there is a log that is retained within the system that IT does have access to. And included in that log typically is the score that was given to that email. So each email has what's called a message header, which is metadata. It's just information about that email, right? So information about the sender, information about the recipient, the server from which it came, the type of server that it used, as well as the results of any security checks that are done along the way. That ultimately contributes to whatever that's the what we call a spam confidence level score is. And that should be logged as well. So I think typically in these scenarios, the question that comes up is, well, why? Why was a particular message not delivered, or why was the decision made? And those logs and those tools are really there to help our customers understand sort of what the rationale is and why it is that those messages are being blocked.
Okay. You mentioned that one of the criteria that the system uses to determine if something is spam or belongs, or possibly phishing, is the subject line and those patterns that are used in the subject line. That really gets to the heart of the matter of what we're talking about, because when a group is sending an email, generally those subject lines are going to at least be similar, if not exactly the same. So is this a setting that our IT department can adjust so that that one criteria is eliminated?
So that specific control, no. You, we don't provide customers with that granular control in terms of or determining which specific elements of an email message are being considered or being assessed as to whether or not the message is spam or otherwise malicious. I'm familiar with those form emails from special interest groups, et cetera, that go out. And those run a high risk of being flagged as junk or spam, just based upon a number of the factors, right? The fact that they are typically sent in bulk, the fact that they typically all follow the same, they're typically sent to multiple, if not all, of the recipients within the organization at times. And also the fact that they often do include attachments to one pagers or links out to additional content. I would say there are a number of there isn't necessarily a silver bullet. There isn't one specific solution to being able to ensure that those messages are able to be delivered. What I would say though is that in most cases that I've seen, either there's an issue on the sending side where the sender has not appropriately configured the necessary apologies. Where the sender has not configured the appropriate sort of capabilities necessary to allow recipients to validate that the messages themselves are not spam. There are certain rules that bulk email senders are required to follow for bulk email, such as including a link to unsubscribe, certain sort of privacy or otherwise or other disclosures as well. So oftentimes I've seen scenarios where using those bulk email services, the organizations have not done their due diligence in completely actually configuring those services so that to ensure that those messages aren't flagged as spam, and typically do so in a responsive way.
Mr. Brent, as a follow-up to that, how would they know without some sort of indication? They'd have to ask one of the recipients if they received the email and get a factual answer on that. How would they know that they had failed to set up their bulk email system correctly to avoid these kind of blocking mechanisms?
That's a good question. So typically, and I won't sort of speak to any one individual bulk mailing solution, but some of the more common or the more prominent ones actually will include somewhat of a setup guide, like a wizard, where step one is you provide the organization name, and then you validate that you own the domain, right? The .com or the .gov or the .net that you're sending from. And step 3 or 4 usually is setting up your sender identity verification records. Technical, but there's typically sort of usually at step 2 or 3, most of the more prominent or popular services include that in their setup guidance, right? So it's not necessarily something that is as hidden or otherwise sort of difficult to find. Usually, and the reason is those providers are in the business of delivering email, not having their emails blocked or otherwise restricted. So, and understanding ultimately the end goal of their customers, right, is to is communication and outreach. They want to ensure that they're providing their customers with the necessary information so that they can successfully do so.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it really falls upon them to be responsible and figure this all out. I know your time is limited, so and it looks like we have further questions we'd like to ask. So what I'm going to ask is that we make sure that we have your contact information with our staff so that members of this committee can reach out to you and ask further questions. But thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate your time and your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Brett.
Absolutely.
And, all right, Mr. Obrecht, if you'd like to move us on to the next.
Mr. Chairman, just one quick last question before Brendan goes, if I might.
Mr. Grew, Senator.
Thank you. Brendan, yeah, and I too, thank you for your time. And I know your time's short, but just want to ask something that the good chairman asked and make sure I understood about these header lines that if you gave the ability to staff or to legislators to say to staff, hey, something with this header line, you know, goes through. Your only objection, Microsoft's only objection to doing something like that would be that would send a message to the people with malicious intent that that header line would be okay. So we'd be kind of telegraphing the pass to potential hackers or whatever that you put that in the header line, it's going to go through. So, you know, that would be a shortcut to do it. And that might be a way or a reason why Microsoft would be reluctant to give that kind of to say that's one way to do that. That would that be a fair characterization?
Senator, when you say the header line, do you mean the subject specifically?
Subject line, yes.
Yes. And is your question specifically in terms of disclosing the specific subject lines that may have been blocked historically?
The other way around, that we said that this is okay. You put this on there, it's all right.
Sure.
And we say, so then you're telegraphing the pass back to potentially saying, oh, that's okay.
Yeah. So in fact, you have the logs to be able to review what emails have been blocked or otherwise determined to be junk, and what the subject lines from those emails were. It would be difficult based upon that information to determine whether or not the subject line and the subject line alone was the only factor or even the contributing factor.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bren. We really appreciate your time. Mr. Obrecht, if you'd like to continue, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And just before Mr. Brin gets off the call, just to let you know, we will engage with him through Microsoft to do a review of the Wyoming Legislature's email exchange about any possible adjustments that may be made. And this is, I'm sure, very helpful to him. He heard all of your concerns and issues with the current settings and what may need to be adjusted. So thank you again, Mr. Bren. Really appreciate it, and talk to you soon. Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, Anthony Serra, our Deputy Operations Administrator and also the head of our IT department, will provide a brief history of the Wyoming Legislature's email exchange and what has been done in that area in the recent past.
Mr. Serra?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. Good to see you all. As Matt said, Anthony Serra, Legislative Service Office. You know, a lot of what I was going to touch on here has been discussed already, so I don't want to belabor some of these points. But, you know, really what it boils down to is typically, and Matt touched on this at the beginning of the meeting, LSO has not really been involved in the management of legislators' email. And as you can tell, over this last hour or so discussion, it's very complicated. And there's a lot that goes into this. And just like everything else in the Wyoming legislature, there's 93 different opinions on how your email should be managed. So, you know, we've done our very best here in the last 6 months to learn, because frankly, we have not been involved in this much. So we've learned a lot in the last 6 months. But obviously we have more to learn, and that's what we're going to do with this engagement with Microsoft. You know, really the most important point out of all this is that we want to just make sure that everybody understands is that, you know, legislators are receiving everything in varying degrees. So it's either coming into that inbox, junk folder, or quarantine. And we talked a little bit about, you know, being able to mark things as junk and phishing. But I also want to, you know, point out that it also works the other way. So legislators also have the ability to mark things as not junk. And they do have the ability to release things from their quarantine folder as well, so that those items are not quarantined in the future. So it works both ways. So legislators do have that ability to mark things as not junk as well. Really, you know, again, I just want to reiterate that we have really never dove into these security settings, and we've always kind of relied on the Microsoft default settings. As you know, we have a small staff, and so it's difficult to manage, like I said, 93 different opinions. I'm going to probably transition into this email management system that Jamie's been working on with Representative Bear, unless you have any other questions, because like I said, a lot of what I was going to discuss, we've already discussed. There's a couple other things that we have talked about doing potentially for this committee to decide, or at least consider, and Management Council to decide, in addition to this email management system. But also another thought that we've had is, a lot of states use a form-based system. So rather than providing public email addresses on our website, for example, participants have to fill out a form. And you'll see that, for example, on the governor's website. So rather than the ability to send an email, blast emails to you all, they have to actually fill out a form, and then you receive that electronically. So that's, another thing that maybe we can consider at some point down the road as well. And then, we did this during session, and we can continue to do this, but education, just educating legislators on how to use their email systems, where to be checking those three areas, the junk folder, the quarantine, so the legislators are educated on what they need to do to make sure they're getting the messages that they received. So
Mr.
Go ahead.
The suggestion you made where we have a form, much like the governor's office, and all emails have to come through that gate. How many state legislators use that sort of a system, or do you know, or could you find that out for us?
Representative Bear, I don't know, but that's certainly something that we could look into to determine how many legislators are doing that, or legislatures are doing that.
Okay, thank you. Before we move into, a potential solution from the perspective of legislators, which is what myself and Mr. Shob have been working on, I would like to wrap up this discussion where we have been and ask you a few questions about where we're at currently. The discussion with Mr. Brin was that there's a setting of 1 through 10. Could you just share with the committee where we're at today as far as our setting on Microsoft?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the specific number, but what I do know is during session, we were on, for legislator at the beginning of session, we were on what's called strict. And during session, when these items were raised, we lowered that down to standard for legislators. So we went from strict to standard. I don't have the specific number score that we're on, but I do know that we did lower that to standard.
Okay. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Anthony. Thanks for being here. I too, there's been a lot of talk about these issues with email, and so I just kind of want to get a sense of this. I got a pretty good sense of it from Microsoft's perspective, but from the staff's perspective, I guess what my first question would be, you all, and I'm talking about my own individual cases, only thing I have to really go on this, but that you all react to us individually when it comes to a lot of this stuff. I know I've walked in during session when we're getting just besieged with emails on a subject, and all of a sudden I can't even see where, emails from staff about bill drafts or anything else. I can't find them because they're just flooded in a sea of emails. And I'll walk in usually just a little bit, on the fly and say, hey, turn up my spam filter. This is going over the top. I can't erase them fast enough or move them to a file. Is that generally how that works with the staff? That like I say, I don't. Well, let's just start there.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Guru, what I have emphasized to our staff when the legislator comes to those requests is, and really this goes back to even before this discussion started. So I can tell you that this is something that we've kind of put into practice for at least a year or two. What I've told them is we really need to be careful on not doing anything that's going to affect all users. So for example, if you come to one of our IT staff and ask for a sender to be blocked, what we're going to do is show you how to do that on your individual mailbox. You know, what I just talked about, mark it as junk, because what you consider junk, the next legislator may consider something that they want. So we would never do anything that would block an email coming in to the entire tenant based on one legislator's request. The only exception to that would be, and this happens rarely, but a handful of times, and this came up in your discussion with Brandon, you know, when something really malicious comes through and you get an email from one of our IT staff that say, don't click this link. Well, we're going to block that because we know that that is malicious and a phishing, and we don't want that getting through. But like I said, I mean, that happens a handful of times, maybe less than 5 times a year. But we're never going to do anything that's going to impact all users because, like I said, what you consider junk, the next legislator may consider a valuable email that they need.
Follow up, Senator Grew?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last question that I've got, and I don't want to put you in a bad spot here with regard to people that you work with and work for, but once again, speaking for myself, not anyone else in the legislature. Given my limited technological capacity, I have found in my experience that 9 times out of 10, when I come to see you guys about a problem, email or otherwise, it generally would fall into the category of operator error as far as how and what my particular problem is, if I'm getting an email or not. And that got graphically proved to me yesterday when I went in and gave a reporter my computer, and they found all kinds of stuff. They found every email that individual groups had ever sent me, and I didn't even know how to do it until they showed me. And so is that with that level, because I know you just talked about, and you and I talked before about this, about education for the body of how to use this system. But this system has a heck of a lot of capabilities, most of which we just scratch the surface on using when we're using it. Is that a fair characterization of what goes on?
Mr. Sarah?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Guru, I mean, what I would say is we could always do a better job with education. You know, you are all so busy and there's so much, there's only so much time. And frankly, you know, a how-to guide would probably come in email, which is kind of funny because then you'd have to find the how-to guide and read it, obviously.
Yep.
But we could always do a better job educating. And I think that's one thing that we certainly have identified through this process, that like I said, we did that during the general session, and we can certainly continue to do that. You know, we offer that IT training to new members. This is obviously something that we probably need to consider including in that, but again, they only get that when they first come in. So, you know, I think a reminder several times a year probably is something that we need to start doing. If obviously this is something the committee and management council see as valuable.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a moment right now and just kind of discuss why Mr. Shelb and I have been working on this particular issue. Really, what we're wanting to do is to provide an option for legislators to help manage their email so that we can maintain at least a standard level of blocking emails coming into the system versus a strict, if not even a lower, if we can do it. And one of the things that Senator Grew, you brought up was the inability to find staff emails. And so what we're going to be attempting to do is create a system, should a legislature choose to use the system, where their emails will be basically put into folders for them so that they can go look at those folders, or they will be in their inbox with labels on them saying, this is one of the subjects that you wanted to highlight. So here's an email. And then you could simply do a search of all of those particular things that you asked to be flagged. So we'll get into a little bit more detail when we get to that subject, but it is an effort to keep legislators out of that situation where they're having to go to staff and say, hey, change my settings because it's just getting overwhelming. We realize there's a problem with the difficulty of going through these emails. I think that's where, you know, it really comes down to we as legislators, some believe that having received the email and it being in the spam or junk folder is sufficient. And others believe, no, you know, that means that's a place where I'm probably never going to go look because I'm getting 800 emails a day anyway, just in my inbox. So that's kind of what we're trying to get at is have something that will work while we're also allowing this First Amendment right of these individuals that believe that their emails are going to reach us while they're working with an organization. So, Mr. Sarah, you can please continue.
Mr. Chairman, that is all I have at the moment,
Okay.
unless anybody has any other questions. The only other thing I would add to that you were working on with Mr. Schaub is that, you know, one of the things that you can set up with that Power Automate is that it diverts all email. So anything that was in your junk folder goes into your inbox instead. So it's all in one place. And then it puts a label on it that says potential spam, so you at least know where that came from. Obviously, that would be, as you mentioned, an option, not a requirement for every member.
Senator Crago, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Anthony, I just have a couple of basic questions. I went through our policy, Management Council email policy, and I didn't see in there, and maybe you can tell me, are we required as electeds to use our WyoLeg email, or could we use a different email service if we wanted?
Mr. Sarah?
And Mr. Chairman, Senator, I can answer that for
Go ahead.
Anthony.
Go ahead, Mr. O'Brien.
What the Management Council policy provides, Senator, is that if you're provided a email address with public funds, which all 93 legislators are, the wyoleg.gov, that has to be on the website and published on the legislature's website. But there's nothing that stops an individual legislator from using a different email address to conduct their business, if that's what that legislator would choose to do.
Follow up, Senator Crago?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So, Director, I guess my question is, so let's say one of our colleagues doesn't like our email, our email service, doesn't like this, how our emails get filtered, etc. Could we put an additional or different email on our website for that particular legislator?
Mr. O'Brien?
Mr. Chairman, I would not see any reason why we couldn't do that. Now, we would need to make sure that that legislator knew that they weren't being provided LSO IT support for that email system or security for it as well. That would all be on between them and whatever email server they're contracting with to provide that.
Follow up?
Yeah, I got a whole list of questions, Mr. Chairman, so sorry.
Please proceed. No, go ahead.
Anthony, you were talking about we're working with Microsoft to go through some of this, have them do a review, et cetera. Is that coming with our subscription, or are we paying additional monies for that? Do you know?
Mr. Chairman, again, I can answer that question as well. Until yesterday, we believed that was going to cost additional funds. We thought the bid we first received from Microsoft or a Microsoft affiliate was $20,000 to do that review. Microsoft has now said no, that's part of our subscription, and they'll do it for us included within that subscription.
Thank you. And then just going back to the follow-up, Mr. Chairman, sorry.
No, please continue.
So going back to sort of the beginning of this issue, you mentioned in the memo you provided to us, Director or Anthony, either one of you, that we had a complaint come in back in January. I guess my question is how many complaints did we get? Was it just one? And was it, or was it more widespread than that? Can you kind of give us a little bit of an understanding of how many groups or one group there was that had an issue with their emails?
Mr. Obrecht?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I received complaints from 2 groups this session that their emails may be being blocked. And on both of those groups, we addressed those issues on an individual basis with the domain names that they provided us. In the past, other groups have also approached LSO, and I think the number is less than 5 within the last 5 years, believing that their emails weren't being delivered to inboxes. And on each case, we individually used their email domain names after we satisfied ourselves that there wasn't anything, a malicious threat associated with them, and made sure those emails were delivered to inboxes.
And follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
So just looking forward, would there be a way for our staff, for LSO, to provide, guidance to some of these groups before session starts, for example, saying, hey, let's do a test run on, we want to send bulk emails to legislators. Would there be a way to do a test run to make sure that that's not happening, to make sure that they're on the so-called good list, et cetera? Could we have a system or a policy to make that happen? Is that a possibility?
Mr. Obrecht?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, we certainly could. What we could do is publish, say, a notice on our website that if email users are concerned that their emails may not be delivered to inboxes, they can contact LSO IT, and we can do a test run of sending those emails to legislators and see if they go through.
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Crago, and we have done that before. It's not very often, but we've had a few groups reach out to us and say, hey, I don't think my emails are getting through. And I personally, so I know other members of our staff have done tests with folks just to make sure that things are getting through. A lot of times what you find is this more has to do with, individuals, but instead of wyoleg.gov, they use wyo.gov, like the executive branch. So there's little quirks like that. Usually, a lot of times we are able to rectify the situation fairly easily. So we have done that in the past for folks, but I think to Mr. Obrecht's point, publicizing that for folks that maybe don't know that is certainly something we can look at.
Mr. Sarah, I'm going to interject here, Senator, for just a second. We received testimony from Mr. Brin at Microsoft that we can look at logs and see why an email might have been blocked. Has our staff ever gone into those logs and discussed that with somebody who, one of these complainants that's has a concern?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, we have looked at the logs. I don't know if we've ever talked to those groups about specifics of what the logs told us, but we have certainly looked at those before. But certainly would be happy to do that with groups if they reach out and have concerns as we dig into it more.
Okay. Please continue, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Sarah or Mr. Obrecht? Okay. Mr. Obrecht, are we at the point where we're going to discuss Jamie's work and try to do that in his absence?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, we certainly can, or and it's completely up to you, Mr. Chairman. If you wanted to hold that over to the next meeting when Mr. Schaub is able to attend, we can do that as well. I think you've given a good outline of what your goal is with this system, and really, I'm sorry about this, but only Jamie can speak to the specifics of it.
That is for sure. I will say this, in addition to what I shared earlier, the line of thinking that he and I are going down right now is that all your emails would come in. You would receive a label on those emails, and it would say potential spam. If you have already set up your system to filter anything that has, for instance, House Bill 338, anything that has that in the subject line, I'd like a label on those so that they could be gathered together. Then once they're gathered together, we can actually flag them if there's anything in the subject line that, and this is getting into a bit of AI, but we can flag them of green if they are pro for that particular bill, or red if they're anti for that bill, and then blue if there's no indication, where you would need to look at that individual email. And currently, AI allows you to kind of summarize some of the subject matter that's in there. We're looking into whether we can filter out those that are actually requesting action by the legislature, so where they're requesting a response versus those that are not. So those are some of the angles that we're working. And I will tell you, I currently have flagged all LSO emails. So they go into what I call my LSO inbox. And Mr. Obrecht's are even separated further into his own inbox. In my inbox, there's a sub folder for those that I received from Mr. Obrecht and those that I received from anyone else in the LSO staff. So those are a couple of things that we're trying to standardize so that we can just kind of provide a package to a legislator that might want those features, and then get their computer set up to do that. And it just allows you to, when you're receiving several hundred emails on one particular subject, you can at least visually take a glance at that. How many emails am I getting? How many are pro for this issue? How many are opposed? And so forth. So Senator Guru.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment. I obviously your knowledge of how to run an email system vastly eclipses my own, and that's probably not a surprise to anybody on this call. But I do a cautionary tale here. I like to decide myself what's pro, what's against, and what's this and what's that. I don't feel I don't think I need the help to tell me what is for and what is against, or have an AI generated system do that weeding for me. I'm also concerned a little bit. I understand what you say about having a separate file for emails from staff, and I think that's a decent suggestion. But I worry, because just talking to some of the members that I talk to about it, I worry that if we did that, some of my colleagues would never look at their inbox again. They just go to the folder and get what they need out of it. But that's their choice, and so that part, I guess, is more where I would land on that, is to keep the choices centered with each legislator as much as possible. And I think that's what you want too. I just said how they get parceled out in the beginning. I can say, if we could always use some more education on how to orient the emails that are coming in. But I'd just as soon set up my own flagging system as far as that goes, and not have it done for me. I'm just concerned about that, as far as other people might look at things differently. Different individuals may look at things differently, and I want to make sure we keep that ability here at home.
Yeah, great point, Senator. And just a point of clarification on that. First of all, the choice would be the legislators, whether they're even going to engage with this potential system we would set up. Obviously, they can set their own system up just as easily if we could educate them to that point where they could do it. And there is a lot of flexibility within this system that we're trying to create for the individual legislator as to how their emails would be bifurcated, if you will, or it's more than bifurcated. It's just organized, if you will. And in that, those labels for anything other than potential spam are labels that you would set up personally. You would say, I want all of House Bill 14 in, to receive a label. So if it has House Bill 14 in lowercase or uppercase, you would set up all those criteria as you see different subjects coming in and say, this is another one that I want with this particular label on it. And so there's still certainly a lot of work to be done by the legislator, but the whole idea is to help them time manage, if you will. And I think you bring up an excellent point. Once you've bifurcated these emails, you may, based on your time availability, not look at certain things. And that's the issue, I think, that's at the heart of this, this committee's work, is that once it's bifurcated into a spam or junk folder, the priority level of a legislator looking at that has automatically gone down. And we certainly are limited in our time to do all these things, since none of us really have our own individual staff to look at our emails on our behalf and really bring stuff to the forefront that's important, that we've determined is important. So great point. And hopefully you can see we're headed down a path. If we do have another meeting, then we will have Jamie come on and give a presentation. But the goal would be that, as incoming classes come and we do our legislator training, we would have a product where we could say, okay, if you tell us you want this, we'll set it up for you. Okay. With that, Mr. Obrecht, are we ready for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, yep. From our perspective, you certainly are.
Okay, let's start with the room. Is there anyone in the room, Ms. Phillips, that would like to comment on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of people in the room physically, and then you do have one person signed up online.
Thank you for that. So let's start within the room, and if you could just have the both of them come forward, and we'll just start with one. If they could introduce themselves, we'll start with them. And I'm unfortunately at a disadvantage. I can't see who's in the room. So Ms. Phillips, I'll rely on you to get them sat down and have them introduce themselves. Is there anyone in the room that would like to speak on this subject?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay. My name is Drake Hill, and I represent Honor Wyoming, a group that originally brought the issue to the attention of Director Obrecht on, I think it was January 8th of 2025, that we had indications that our organization's emails were not getting through. And this had been a continuing discussion because over the course of a couple legislative sessions, there had been indications that the emails were not getting through. I wrote a letter to Mr. Obrecht dated January 8th, 2025, in which Honor Wyoming articulated the First Amendment issues surrounding what we considered to be a lack of access to legislators and a block to communications and speech. And obviously, in that letter, I pointed out that political speech is the highest form of speech, protected speech under the First Amendment, and that we were very interested in understanding the issue and to get to remedies on the issue. I think that perhaps those are the references that have been made today by various members of your committee, that was the original complaint or alert, maybe is a better word, that came through that spawned these discussions. We're thankful to Director Obrecht that he received us immediately and gave attention to the issue. In fact, the investigation revealed that our emails were in fact being quarantined. There is to address perhaps Senator Guru's earlier comments, suggestion that maybe some of those emails were coming from providers who had been blacklisted in the past. None of that was true in our case. They were from reputable firms who took all security precautions that were necessary to ensure that those emails would be, in fact, delivered. And in fact, they were not delivered to the email folders, but were directed to quarantine. Mr. Sarah this morning has indicated, and I appreciate his comments that, in fact, it's only today that I'm learning this, that the security level had been dialed up to, I guess, the highest level. And in working with LSO, what we did is we gave a listing of IP addresses that these emails are going to be coming from, and we then worked with LSO to whitelist, if that's the appropriate term, those IP addresses, and then the emails did in fact get through. Senator Craig, I want to, if I can, with the chair's permission, direct a comment to you of one of your comments. And that is it just the one complaint? And I think Mr. Obrecht and Mr. Sarah answered that question, but I think that perhaps your question reveals the underlying issue, which is, how would you know? How would you know that your emails are not getting through? And in fact, we have a very active group, a very sophisticated group that uses the highest level of resources. Took us a while to figure out that our emails were not getting through, and it only came as a result of our inquiries with legislators. Hey, what did you think about our email? What email? And we got that response back from so many different legislators that, of course, it sent us on the path of inquiry to say, hey, maybe our emails are not getting through. I think that it is a matter of the majority of groups out there don't know that their emails are getting quarantined. And how would they know? Perhaps they're not going to know because they don't have the equipment. They don't have the ability to know that unless they dive deeply into it, as we did with the LSO. So I wanted to talk about that up front. I believe that it is most appropriate for the legislature to treat this from the lens of the citizen rather than the lens of Microsoft or staff, with all due respect to staff, and they know that because we've worked together. It should be addressed through the citizen perspective. So it's not up to the public to figure out how to get past the security settings of the legislature's Microsoft system, Microsoft-based system. It is incumbent upon the legislature to find remedies, as you are dedicated here today to do. But I think that the perspective has to be kept in mind. Now, it was very instructive hearing from the representative of Microsoft, Brandon Bryn, a very knowledgeable man. Microsoft is obviously a highly reputable company, and nothing of what I'm going to say is intended to diminish their their services or their reputation. But Mr. Brin approaches issues. Now remember, he is a security specialist for Microsoft. And a security specialist has a completely different orientation than the rest of us. And it is true that the legislature must, in the state of Wyoming in general, must take precautions to not jeopardize its computer systems to hackers, to those who would jeopardize its systems from a variety of threats. That is all true. But from the citizen perspective, you have to come back to the language being used. And I think that if you listen closely, the words junk email were being used. He used the words unsolicited contacts. Okay, now, if that is one of the security parameters under the Microsoft system, that is unsolicited contacts, then it does absolute violence to the First Amendment and the citizens' right to approach their legislators. And because, of course, all of those contacts, or most of them, will be unsolicited by the citizen. But the citizen has every right to be making those. And that's where we have a disconnect. The disconnect is that Microsoft is ensuring security, but there also has to be consideration of access. It is enshrined in the Wyoming Constitution. It's a part of of course, the United States Constitution. It is of paramount importance, not protecting the state, although we would like to protect the state and nobody wants to see the threats to the state. But at the top of the list is the matter of ensuring access to the citizens. And I will add this to round out the discussion, without imposing unreasonable restrictions, because that's the legal standard here. Unreasonable restrictions. So I don't think this is being said. I hope it's not. But let me just use this as a hypothetical or as an argument that might be made. Well, we have a great number of emails coming through that all look the same. And I, as a legislator, am inundated with emails and I can't manage all of them. And while all that sounds reasonable on its face, and may even be true, the fact is that every last one of those emails from our group is coming through from a different constituent. Those are sacrosanct communications because John Smith in Powell is saying, I am absolutely opposed to this bill, and I'm using this organization to get my word to the legislature. That is something that has to be protected. And so what should happen here is a system where the public is made aware that they're not getting their emails through, or that their emails are getting quarantined, rather than the onus being placed on the citizen to figure it out. And because the citizen has no equipment, has no, in most cases, little sophistication and very few resources to be able to make those determinations. And so you've got to have a system. And so what we did was we approached Mr. Obrick during the session and we said, okay, appreciate all the efforts. And that was a sincere statement then, and it is now, Director Obrick. We appreciate those efforts. We didn't think they were going to go far enough. We didn't think that the internal adjustments were going to completely satisfy the situation. And so there was a House bill that was introduced, HB 338, entitled Disclosure of Undelivered Legislator Emails, sponsored by several of your esteemed colleagues, Weber, Brady, Representatives Gugamos, Heft, McCann, Pendergraft, Wassenberger, Worf from the House side. And this was a product of examination of what could be done to preserve the security of the state's security system, or of the state's computer system, because we had those discussions with Mr. Obrecht. We'd had those discussions with legislators, understood the importance of the security, and this was a product that considered all of that, and it said that the legislature is going to disclose. Now, I think you heard testimony this morning that perhaps that is a guide to better hacking your system. I don't think that's true. I think that merits a lot more examination. I think that is speculative at best. I think that the paramount consideration here is, have you disclosed, done your best with the people of the state of Wyoming to tell them that their emails are not getting through? And to the extent one would say, well, they're in my spam folder, I can go get them if I want, or my quarantine folder, and maybe I'll get to them. I don't think that goes far enough. I don't think that meets the obligation. It's like saying, well, I'm going to have something that is delivered to my office, but we're going to bury it in the backyard. And so then we can technically say, well, it was delivered, but practically speaking, was it really delivered? Was it really utilized? Was it really available? And the answer is no, because most legislators are not going to go into their quarantine file looking for something that might be important. It has already been flagged as unimportant. And so I don't think it's reasonable for legislators to be expected to go into their quarantine and ferret out, oh, this might be important. So that's just not a solution at all. I'd be happy to address any questions, but I wanted to make those clarifications and make sure that you all understood, at least from the citizen perspective, the crux of the problem, the importance of the issue.
Mr. Drake, I didn't get an opportunity to thank you for coming here and giving your testimony. We appreciate that. Senator Grew, you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, question, no, but comment, I think. More to the point, it's like, and we could spend the rest of the afternoon discussing and parsing out what was just testified to by Mr. Hill. I'm not going to do that, but I want to make sure that a couple points are really clear, because some of the things he said are just not quite factually correct. I want to make sure we understand this. Mr. Hill says that his clients' emails are not getting through, when in fact they are. They are getting through. They're getting through in places that he doesn't agree that they should be, in a spam file or a junk file or a quarantine file or an inbox. But that is a subjective and wildly speculative, as he says, to being listed. I check all those sources every single day. Anyone who does any other, like on my private email account, you have to, because a lot of times when you get codes and things and second-party authentications, they go to a junk file. So you have to be constantly checking your junk file to make sure that you're not missing things. And I think that's more basic knowledge, even for my limited capabilities. But to say they're not getting through, your emails are not getting through, I went on my server, typed in your client's name, every single email came up. Every single email came up. And now the chairman wants to talk about a management system where they get put in files. So I guess based on your testimony, if it's put in a file that's marked anything other than junk or quarantine, that would be okay. I actually disagree. I think, the more files we get, the less likely it'll be that we see stuff. And I do have a concern about that. So I share his concern, but I'm really cautious, and I'm very, very circumspect about the way we use some of these terms. And so we say, well, because it's a spam or because it's in a junk file, no one reads it. It's not factually correct. If nothing else is taken from this discussion, that needs to be understood clearly. Every email that we get somewhere, and that we can access it. So to say that this is a First Amendment question on its face is not factual. So those are my comments to that. And I just want to make sure, because it does get to the integrity of legislators. I always love when people tell me what my job is. My citizens of my district are pretty good at telling me what my job is. Every 4 years they mention it, and boy, they're free to share all the time. And so, thanks. I really appreciate the help, but I'll take my cues from them. Thank you. But I just want to make sure that when we talk about these terms in other quarters, and it's emails from your client where they say this has become now a fact, we're not getting emails. It's not true. You need to finish the sentence at the very least. Say they're not getting to our main inbox. That would be okay. But to say we're not getting them makes an assertion that is not factually correct, and we really need to watch that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Senator Guru, since I allowed you to make a comment, I'm going to allow Mr. Hill to respond to that. But before he does, I just want to point out that in one sentence, you're saying that we're receiving them. They're just in our junk file, which you check daily. I'm impressed by that statement. But at the same time, you've gone back and said, well, if it's put in a different folder, I may never see it. So I don't know that those two really jive together, those two statements. But Mr. Hill, I'll let you have the.
No, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. I'd like to respond. I look at those, but if I take a file, let's say we take a file, and just like you just pointed out in some sort of our own little way that we do it. Okay, so I put those into a file marked, don't read this, because I don't want to read that stuff. I'm less likely to read that. And those emails from his client go into one file that says, don't read this junk, then I'm not going to read it for sure. So no, that's why I worry about parsing out into real specifics about this is good, this is bad, and who's subjectively meaning that. I do read all the emails that I get from his client. And so that's why, and what other members do is up to them. So no, I don't think that. So say if you want to parse it out into 50 different categories, okay, but I think it's less likely to read. The more you do, the more there's 3 sources. There's quarantine, inbox, junk. 3, and I look at all 3. So that's
and each legislator may have their own system, just like you just described. I think the term "do not read this" and "junk file," in my perspective, are synonymous. So with that, Mr. Hill, I'll let you have the last word.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the fact that the orderliness of the legislature and their process requires comments be directed to the chair, which I will do, so as to prevent the back and forth and arguments erupting that may or may not be productive. So in directing the comments through the chair, I will say I have been absolutely accurate in my statement. And you can go back and read the transcript. What I said was that our emails were being delivered to quarantine. I said, I don't think that's sufficient. Now, others and the state may well dispute whether this is a First Amendment issue. We believe it is. When the citizens are being hampered in access to their legislator, then it is cutting off their ability to speak to their legislator, and it is, in my view, a First Amendment violation. We don't need to get into that dispute today. I merely gave that background to frame it as reference, that this is the way the discussion got started. Now, Mr. Obrick could detail for you the efforts that were undertaken to make sure that the Honor Wyoming emails did get through. But I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, that not all emails from Honor Wyoming bear the name of Honor Wyoming. So if one were to say, well, I go back and I look for Honor Wyoming emails and I believe I've got them all, then that would be inaccurate, because not all of them bear the name of Honor Wyoming. Again, we're back to the question of what's the priority? And the priority, I think, is to make sure that the citizens have full access, that those emails are getting through. I think that it couldn't be any more meaningful that a citizen, or excuse me, that a legislator, and I'm not trying to tell legislators how to do their job. I have the highest degree of respect for legislators. And we appreciate the efforts that are being taken here today. But the citizens can have their opinion and weigh in on this topic, as they are constitutionally enabled to do. But it is relevant to know that 500 people are opposed to this bill, and that only 100 people spoke in favor of it. It's the same process that theoretically unfolds in public comment in person. It is an extension, after all, of the public comment right that this body and you as legislators honor every day, every time that you get together for a hearing. So the email is perhaps even the most direct form of democracy, because it enables the citizen to communicate. And we don't want to place unreasonable burdens or unreasonable requirements on the citizens, or expect of them things that are completely unreasonable, to figure out how they have to get around the state system or the legislature system. With that, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. We have great respect for the efforts that you're taking on this issue, and we hope that maybe that the House bill that was offered in the session might serve to inform your analysis and your approach. We believe that it is obligatory for the legislature to disclose what's not getting through, rather than having citizens try to figure it out on their own. Thank you very much.
Senator Crago, a question for Mr. Hill.
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hill, I just digging into, I guess, getting down to the specifics. The emails that were going to quarantine, were they emails that were being sent by individual constituents through your email service? I mean, they weren't, or were they, let me ask this, or were they actual emails from, johnqpublic@hotmail.com? How exactly were they flagged? Do you know?
Yes, and I'm working from recollection, Senator Crago. Those were emails largely that were being offered through the service, where the service was facilitating the citizen contact.
And follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
And were those form comments or form emails, Mr. Hill?
Well, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, and did I interrupt you? And I'm sorry.
No, that was the end of my, I mean, that's the end of that question, I should say.
Okay, so were they form substantially the same content of email is what I'm hearing your question to be?
Yes, sir.
And I think that in many instances they were. I would add to that that is fine, that is productive, because it is a message to the legislators that that I am opposed to this particular piece of legislation or whatever the message is. Those persons are signing on to that message. They are asking for that message to be sent, and they are directing it to the legislators. So I think that it is highly valuable speech.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Craigo.
Yeah, and I'm not making a comment one way or the other, Mr. Hill, about the quality or the worthiness of those particular comments. I'm just trying to get to the bottom. So as we move forward and we're looking at this issue, we have all the facts before us. So if we start asking our staff to do something or not do something, we know what the issues were. I was just trying to get to it because I like Senator Grew, I actually look at my junk or spam or whatever you want to call it every day. When we open our email, we have two columns. We have our main inbox, and then we have the other one next to it. I go down through all of them, try to at least, every day. And so I'm with him, but I just was curious on how those came through and how they were getting flagged. My last question is, do you believe that we have solved the problem, at least as it relates to Honor Wyoming? Has LSO addressed your concern, and are your emails from your client now getting to the intended recipients?
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the question, Senator. We believe that during the session it was being handled and that our emails were getting through. That took considerable effort, but I think that they were getting through during the session. I don't have a solid answer for you on going forward, whether the issue has been satisfied without our continuing interface with LSO and to ensure that these particular IP addresses are going to go through, and there would be a great deal of interface in that regard. I can't give you an answer that it has been solved for Honor Wyoming. In fact, I'd be more inclined to say that going forward it has not been. We were assisted by Director Obrecht and his staff, and fine staff that they are, to make sure that our emails did get through during the session, once we discovered the problem.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hill, you say going forward you do not believe the problem has been solved. What makes you say that?
Mr. Chairman, to clarify, I'm saying I'm uncertain whether it's been solved. I'd have to have more information to be able to answer that. I think we've got a good working relationship with LSO to be able to ensure that we are getting the emails through to the main email rather than to quarantine. But I'd have to examine that more closely. So I'm uncertain is my comment today.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Please, Senator.
So, Mr. Hill, what do we need to do to, alleviate your concerns, or how do we figure that out? You said you need more information. What exactly information what information do you need?
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Chairman, and Senator Craigo, I think that the process that you have unfolding in front of you is what I need. I think that it's yet to be determined whether the problem is going to be solved, and if it's solved for all groups and for citizens who are seeking to communicate with the legislature, then it will be, I hope, solved for Honor Wyoming. So we're very interested in this process. We're interested in what you're hearing from Microsoft and from staff as to the solutions that you come up with. As I said, I recommend, and we recommended, House Bill 338 as a disclosure mechanism that is a function that is fair to the citizens, we believe.
Senator Crago?
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Hill from the committee? Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hill, for being here today. I appreciate your testimony and your willingness to be involved in this conversation and help us. I believe that ultimately what we're here to do is make sure that we do have good communication and opportunity to be able to hear from our constituents. The only thing that I'm curious about your thoughts on this, there was some discussion there with the Microsoft gentleman there, Mr. Brim, in the fact that potentially using a specific word grouping or something like that can potentially open the door to other nefarious actors trying to basically hijack that heading, those words, in an effort to try to be able to put their information out. Do you, in your research on this and your work on this, do you see any potential that could be a concern, or do you believe that the URLs and the IP addresses and stuff can handle that? And would that be something that is of concern of yours, sir?
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Speaker, I think that that statement bears far more scrutiny than just accepting it for face value. I think that this highly qualified expert that you had before you this morning, a very well-intentioned person that he is, speaks from a security standpoint. And I believe that in his world, it might be, degrees of risk. And I think he was trying to express what he was saying by degrees of risk. That factor on its own as being a invitation or giving the ability for those intending to do nefarious things the platform to do so. I'm not sure about that. I don't have a great enough security background, although I have studied these issues. But I think that I think you have to take that in the overall context of what he was saying, which is they're trying probably to get to zero risk or something closer to a zero risk. And it's all a matter of managed risk. And the only way you're going to get there completely would be to not allow emails at all. So I don't know exactly how serious of an issue that would be, but I think that bears a lot more investigation rather than just saying, well, if we publish IP addresses, that's going to be a huge security breach for the legislature in the state of Wyoming. I don't think that's what he was saying. I don't think that would be the case.
Further questions from the committee? Mr. Hill, I have a follow-up to that last question, and I think I'm going to phrase it in a bit of a statement, and then I'll get to the question. So what you just said, degrees of security is where Microsoft, their expertise comes in. And one of the statements made by Mr. Brennan was that filters are not 100% successful. And another statement that he made was that this is an ongoing, ever-changing system that they are continually working on and developing new ways of determining what emails are security risks, what emails are nefarious. And, in your response to Senator Crago, you said that House Bill 338 and creating a public notice that your emails are being blocked is really the methodology that you're seeking in remedying this situation to protect the First Amendment rights of our constituents from the issue of over securing our system. So with that bit of information, two things I want to ask you. Number one is how comfortable are you with the employees of Microsoft determining whether your emails should be in our inbox or whether they should be quarantined? And the second part of the question is, as this system that Microsoft is ever developing and ever changing, would having the information publicly listed, where emails are being blocked, would that overcome the ever-changing nature of this security issue? Those are my two questions.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me address your first question and then be reminded of your second. But as to your first, am I comfortable with Microsoft essentially making determinations that make decisions for the citizens? I'm not comfortable with that. But that doesn't really go far enough in articulating what I'd like to put out there. I think that Microsoft designs their product for the broad base of users. So they're going to design an email system that is for businesses, private businesses. And they're going to try to anticipate what a private business or individuals need from their product, and they're going to try to ensure the security of those products and that the user of their products are not going to get harmed by the use of the product. And I also recognize that I'm sure that Microsoft has a division within their large company that tries to anticipate the needs of other users. But understand that we have a peculiar user of email in the legislature, because it's not a matter, strictly speaking, of the legislature making sure that it has security needs taken care of, although we do want those needs taken care of course. They have the additional concern of communicating with their constituents. And that's an aspect that is much different for a legislative body than all the other users that Microsoft is going to serve. So I think the perspective, as I tried to say earlier, is that the Microsoft security perspective, up to you to determine, but does it fully take into account your need to take in constituent comments?
Okay. And then lastly, would the solution of posting publicly the list of blocked emails, would that overcome the ever-changing nature of this addressing this threat?
Mr. Chairman, it's a dynamic system, as Mr. Brin articulated. And the dynamic system, as with any risk mitigation, must respond to new threats, it must respond to developments, and it must respond to increased sophistication on the part of those who would do harm. Very nature of security. in that respect, the system that we proposed, that some of your House colleagues proposed, was also dynamic because it, we think, put a fairly minimal burden on the LSO staff to come up with on a very, very regular basis a listing of those IP addresses that are being blocked, so that then the work can be done by the public having been given the information, or at least access to the information without having to go through many channels to get to it. But they've got access to the information that these IP addresses are being quarantined, and there's a process to handle that if you think that your emails should not be sent to quarantine. So we believe that we devised a pretty good system where it could be responsive to the dynamic nature of the threats that the state is facing, but also putting at the top of the list the constituents' right to know that their emails are being sent to quarantine.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. We appreciate your time and your presence here at this committee. Ms. Phillips, you mentioned that we had another person that would like to testify in the room. Is that still true?
Mr. Chairman, the other people in the room do not wish to testify today.
Okay, you said we had someone online. Could you please bring them into the meeting?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Joey Carenti is joining the room now.
Okay, Mr. Carenti, welcome to this special subcommittee. Could you please introduce yourself and let us know your concerns with this issue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joey Carenti. I am testifying as an apparently unsophisticated member of the general public who does not retain the tools or resources to send emails. I understand a lot of the arguments, and I'm not going to raise this to the level of a First Amendment constitutional violation. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience and maybe provide some topics for the committee to contemplate. We used Outlook when I was in the Army, about 20 years of experience with that, and I know for a fact there are difficulties with the internal settings, especially when you have a higher command setting those options for what can and can't get through. And I also know that there are ways around them. And really what it came down to is something we've heard a couple times: education and training. And I don't know that this is a single issue. It sounds like multiple issues: deliverability, accessibility, and then the legislator's specific or individual choice to view or respond to an email. From what I've heard and experienced, all emails that have been sent are accessible. I happen to send my emails from a server that Outlook doesn't really like, but I've been told by legislators that, hey, your email was in my quarantine. Sorry, I didn't get to it in time, but it was accessible. So when it comes to education and training, I think that a regularly updated, not just process by LSO for new legislators, but an accessible video to the public so we can see what the legislators are being taught, how they're using their system, and how we can make sure that we're able to contact our legislators, because it is important. But again, I don't know that we want to go to the point where we're adding content to the green books, criminalizing a process, saying, well, now you have to read, not just receive. Well, now you have to reply. And now you have to vote in a manner that says whatever the majority of emails you get that you've read and replied to say you have to do. I think we're getting into a little bit of a slippery slope. Some of the things we did when we were dealing with the Army.mil Outlook was having those segregated email folders where it automatically sends to a folder based on who the sender is. I had one for different levels of command, different individuals within my working group. And I don't think it would be a bad idea to have that option for legislators to choose to say, everything coming from LSO and staff automatically goes to this folder. Everything that comes from .gov, Wyoming.gov, top 5 elected goes to this folder. Segregate, I think there's actually already the ability within the options to do that. Again, my concern, and I heard it spoken, well, some legislators just aren't going to look. Some legislators just aren't going to look. We're already there, I believe. The legislator and private email account, I don't know if that eventually will bring up a FOIA issue, but I don't think there's any problem with a legislator automatically forwarding all emails, whether they're spam, junk, quarantined, to their own private email. I think that's a responsibility the legislator can choose to take on. And if they are really worried about making sure they're getting all their emails, they can take steps to do that probably within the existing system. Now, I've been out of the Army a while. Outlook may have changed, but I don't know that restricting emails to the point where you can never find out you got an email is the answer or the current status of the Outlook program. I got a couple of LSO legislator. Again, archive folders. I heard people say a couple statements about, well, I want to see all the emails related specifically to this. If that education to the public is available, and say, hey, when you send an email, make sure you're putting in the bill number so we can search it. That search function is already available. But remember, bill numbers recycle every year. So to maybe have after a year, this goes to this archive folder. I think those settings are already available. Again, I haven't seen anything that says an email isn't getting through, can't go through, and can't be found by the legislator. I had a couple more notes here, but I think I'm going to go ahead and cut your guys' day a little bit short and just say I really believe that in the end, this is a legislator choice with a little bit of work and effort from the LSO because it's a system that we don't own. It is a Microsoft system. And that if individuals don't feel that their legislator is taking them seriously or hearing their voice, we have an option to deal with that every 2 to 4 years. If it's that big of a deal to you and you haven't used any of the other options, to contact your legislator. And then if we're looking at maybe improving it to where we have the First Amendment concerns, the security concerns, and Wyoming visibility and control over it, we might want to look into tapping our 4-year land grant university or any of our community colleges and developing a proprietary email system specifically for Wyoming government that we know everything about, we know where everything goes, and we have full control over it. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate your testimony. Any questions for Mr. Correnti? Seeing none, we thank you and appreciate your being here. Mr. Obrecht, do we have any other items on our agenda before we get to directives?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think we're at that point of business.
Okay. Committee, what is your prerogative? Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think based on the information that we do need to have this conversation with Jamie. I'd like to get his input on this. I'd like to continue to look forward to another gathering where we can get together and have his feedback on this and how this would look going forward. I appreciate the testimony of everybody here today. This has been very informational. Thank Mr. Hill and Mr. Grimm and Mr. Correnti for their input, and would look forward to that information from Jamie, and then we can be able to see what we want to do for directives from my perspective, sir.
Senator Groot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I couldn't agree more with the speaker. I think it's been very informative, and I want to clear up a couple things. I do want to hear, really do want to hear what you and Jamie have been working on. And if we want to start, to me, I just don't know how much difference between things it is to say we're going to set up files to do this. And I don't think it's, I heard very clearly what you said about you think I'm, saying this. I think we're both saying the same thing in two different ways about how we look at it. So we call them whatever, we can call it great stuff, really great stuff, and the greatest stuff instead of spam or junk or quarantine. And then maybe that'll do the trick. I don't know, but I do worry about if we, in the moment with during the session, if we have a segregated place where just emails go. I think it's a good idea, but I'm afraid I would look less at regular emails if I had just stuff from staff there in a separate. That would be quicker for sure. So I would like to see it because I too want to make sure that I get a chance to hear from my constituents and hear from folks. That's why I read the emails and I try to respond to everyone. I don't do it just for my county or anything else. I try to respond to every email. I put them in files, and then when I get to them, I go back. So I'm interested in trying to do it, but I don't want to leave today without just making sure that all of us on the committee know and understand quite clearly. We get our emails, all of them. We get them. When citizens send us emails, we get them. Yes, we heard from Microsoft about security, about security, about having things that could crash our system. And so I do worry about setting the filters down so low that our system crashes. What would that do to constituents being able to contact us? If the system's down, and I know that's been a problem in other jurisdictions, where if you set it down too low and you're crashing the system, then no one gets emails and the whole thing stops. So I don't know if that's a preferred alternative. So I do want to, and I think we all want to make sure that we don't compromise our system, compromise our personal information, whatever personal information may be there. So, and I look forward to working with staff on this. I think the staff has done a very good job. That's another thing I want to make sure we don't leave today with. I hope we can all agree that our staff is working diligently. The LSO is working hard to make sure that we get all our emails, and seems to be, in my talks with them leading up to this meeting, has been over backwards to try to make sure that that is upheld. And I'm sorry about getting a little prickly with one of the folks testifying today when they make these statements. We're not getting emails. This is in violation of the First Amendment. I don't think either one of those things occurred, and I hope we can all agree that they haven't. I hope we can all agree with that. So those, and I too look forward to seeing how we do it and seeing how this comes out with the work with Jamie. I'm sorry I wasn't here today, and I hope whatever family emergency he had gets settled quickly and successfully. So look forward to working with this group to get to these answers, but make sure we do it in a way that doesn't compromise our own integrity, because that's a worry for me when we let these statements just hang out there wherever in cyberspace or anywhere else. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One of the things that I mentioned it earlier is that we are different from a lot of legislators in that we don't have staff individually. We have a unit staff for the entire 93 legislatures, but no one is capable of going through our emails and ensuring that we don't miss something other than ourselves. And so, there's this great new technology that really should be able to help us with that. And what Jamie and I have found is that it's pretty limited at this point in helping us with our emails the way that this AI works right now. It's able to work on a thread, if you will, where you're going back and forth between a group of people, but it certainly doesn't help when you have separate emails coming from separate people on the same subject. And that's what we're trying to get to, is to provide help for legislators who are limited in time as a citizen legislature. So hopefully that'll be the outcome when we get something really nailed down, he and I. So that's what we're working on. Any other comments from the committee? I would like to have us discuss one thing before we finish up, and that is if we were to set a policy and present that to our greater committee, the Management Council, would it be a policy that we do in our procedures and rules, or is it something that needs to be in statute? And I guess that would be a question that I'd like to start with Mr. Obrecht answering. Is there a need for statute or statutory change, or is the actions dealing with the emails and what we have LSO do in that regard, is it sufficient to have it in our rules and procedures, or is it necessary to have it in statute? Mr. Obrecht?
Mr. Chairman, email policy has always been handled via management council policy in the past. So that's where I would start. That's the purpose of this subcommittee, is to maybe come up with revisions to the current email policy specific to these issues you've discussed today. And of course, if the legislature as a body, both houses don't want to follow that policy, they've got mechanisms to do that through rules or through statute.
Okay. Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that this policy says, 97 dash whatever, leads me to believe that we haven't looked at this in a while, and it's time. It's high time. The technology has advanced so much so quickly, and it's been said here numerous times, it's evolving hourly, and so as we speak. So I would be reluctant to try to capture in statute. We can try to make something, but I would think it would end up being it'd have to be watered down so much to take into account, every eventuality that's coming down the pike. But I definitely think a policy and going back to management council and saying this is something we need to take up, and it's high time. So I think that that's where, just so far what I've seen, I'm still very reluctant to. And we talked about the bill that did not make it through, and I think it didn't for some good reasons, and maybe need some tweaking. But right now, I'd like to see us head down the road of trying to come up with something in rule or in policy for the management council to take a look at.
Okay. Any other comments about our future direction? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Obrecht, or were we set up to have a second meeting then so that we can get that testimony from Mr. Schaub?
Mr. Chairman, you bet. You can have a second meeting at your call.
Okay, we'll work with staff and try to get a time frame that works for everybody, but we'll need to have that soon so that we can get back to the committee with our findings. So,
and Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Maybe I'll just provide a little time frame. Your next scheduled management council meeting, where this is tentatively planned to be discussed, whatever the findings of the subcommittee are November 18th and 19th.
Yep.
And Mr. Chairman, maybe I'd just revisit one thing and get some committee direction, so that Tamara and Anthony and I can begin to draft policy. The idea was floated by Senator Crago of some sort of notice on our website to constituents of how they can check with LSO to verify that their emails are being delivered to inboxes. Do you want us, as the committee directive, do you want LSO to draft a potential notice for posting on our website?
I'll just say it this way, without objection, we would. Is there any objection to that? Okay. That will be the direction that we'd like to go at this point, is to develop a policy of informing the public how to get a hold of LSO to determine whether their emails are going through or not, and how to make sure that they do.
And Mr. Chairman, we'll also work on the management council email policy to clarify in that email or in that policy how it's each legislator's responsibility to check their quarantine folder, check their junk folder, work with LSO staff if they want to modify their Outlook settings. And so our policy will or that draft policy for you to consider then would, it currently does put the onus on the individual legislator, but we'll provide the different tools that LSO can render to help manage inboxes. Because I think, Mr. Chairman, a point you made earlier about how unique Wyoming legislators are bears repeating, is that, a lot of legislators don't have public-facing emails at all. And if they do, it's not the legislator who's checking those emails. It's a staff member and then forwarding the emails on to the member. So, you need management tools, is what we've heard extensively at LSO, to manage inboxes. And we can certainly work to provide those, and that should be outlined in your policy as well.
Thank you. Senator Guru?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think, we could work on developing a lot of things. I think one would be writing every legislator and saying, you get every email in your Outlook system. Would you like to find out how you can get it to a place that you can see it immediately? And then that might just prompt legislators to chime in and say, boy, yeah, I'd like that. So it might be as simple as that to help get the ball rolling, to help train the members into how to use this very powerful system that we have at our disposal, that we pay for and pay a fair amount for. And so, I think that anything we can do to get there is I think really where we all want to be. Second, if we're going between now and our next meeting, whenever that is, and I look forward to our chairman, having one of those, that if we are going to talk with the folks at our vendor, that we do so with our staff to make sure that we're communicating that correctly. If we have questions of them, to direct those questions through staff, or to set up another meeting with Microsoft, and that maybe we could all participate in if those meetings occur. That's just a request. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any further comments?
Mr. Chairman, just one further that we'll make sure we get on everybody's radar. Also, before the next meeting, we'll have Microsoft look at our system after Mr. Bren heard your concerns today, and in our staff meeting with him yesterday, can be able to see if there's any sort of adjustments to the system that need to be made, so that more constituent emails are delivered to inboxes, if that's possible, and then we'll bring those to the subcommittee, those adjustments as well.
Very good. Very good. Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I guess I would just, for the committee's own knowledge, LSO can see when individual legislators make a choice to block an email, if we go in to look at that particular email. And legislators are actively blocking senders and sending them to their junk folder. And that's an individual choice. But what happens with that is kind of what Senator Guru and Mr. Brin discussed. What does Microsoft's machine learning then take from those? And that, honestly, we can't tell you at the end of the day. But I would also mention this. Us contracting with Microsoft to provide this system is, that's industry standard. The state itself doesn't provide its own email system. It partners with Google to do it. And you heard Mr. Brin's testimony that the Massachusetts House and Senate partners with Microsoft. So I haven't investigated it, but I do not believe that we have the capability as a state to stand up our own email exchange.
Yeah, I would think that would be a cumbersome task, especially when Microsoft they're already challenged in an ongoing effort to block phishing and nefarious email systems. So yeah, I think you've probably picked the best choice for the state of Wyoming at this point, and we need to figure out the best way to make it work for both the legislature and the constituents. And with that, I think we're ready to adjourn. So this meeting is adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick.
Go ahead.
The only other item I had, and I think it was from you, was to take a look at how many legislators use form-based to contact legislators. Is there a desire for that as well? Okay.
Yeah, I think that certainly would solve a lot of the issues that we're running into.
Okay.
But it would certainly change the interaction between constituents these organizations that we've been talking about today and the legislature. So before we go there, I'd like to know, where do we stand in respect to other states in that regard?
Great. We'll do that as well. Thank you.
Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you all.